reality of the war on the grounds that Yugoslavia was not a full member of the United Nations at the time when the case was
I know the case when maybe they finally reached that judgment. For several years they were deliberating it. But, and that's the sequence. Does any of this get reported? You can ask your friends at Princeton. Ask the faculty. They won't know. I mean, these, any more than they will know that, I mean, they sort of probably remember the bombing, the capture of the General Hospital at Fallujah, but was there one comment anywhere saying there's a war crime?
What struck me was that you compared the Srebrenica massacre with the Fallujah invasion. Why is that comparison?
Similarities. I mean, in the case of Srebrenica, the women and children were trucked out, and then came, you know, the massacre. In the case of Fallujah, the women and children were ordered out. They weren't trucked out. They were ordered out, but the men weren't allowed to leave. Then came the attack. In fact, it turned out that the roads out were blocked. Well, I mean, the whole thing isn't, you know, just, it's not the same story, but that part is similar. I actually mentioned that a couple of times. Storm of protest, hysteria, you know. Incidentally, this Guardian affair, part of it, which was total fraud, on the part of the editors, not the reporter. They blamed it on the reporter, but it was the editors. One of the things that they were infuriated about was that she asked me, what about the thin man and the behind the barbed wire? Isn't that a horrible atrocity? And I said, well, you know, it's not certain that it was correct. Okay, that led to a hysteria. That's when Philip Knightley tried to intervene to present once again his analysis and once again his critique of the media, but couldn't. And he's a very prominent, prestigious person. You just cannot break ranks. That's not tolerated. I mean, we're lucky. We don't have censorship. It's a free society. But the self-censorship is overwhelming. Actually, Orwell once wrote about this in something that nobody's read. Everyone has read Animal Farm, but almost nobody's read the introduction to Animal Farm.
Unpublished.
Unpublished. Came out as unpublished papers 30 years later. In it, what he said is, Animal Farm's a satire of this totalitarian state. He said free England is not very different. In free England, unpopular ideas can be suppressed without the use of force. He gave some examples. It's very similar here, and it doesn't matter how extreme they are. I mean, the Iraq invasion is a perfect example. There is not, you cannot find anywhere in the mainstream a suggestion that it's wrong to invade another country. That if you invade another country, you have to pay reparations, you have to withdraw, and the leadership has to be punished. I mean, I don't know if you ever read the Nuremberg judgments, but after the Nuremberg judgments, Justice Jackson, the chief of counsel for the prosecution, U.S. Justice, made a very, very eloquent statement about how we're sentencing these people to death. The crimes for which they committed are crimes when anybody commits them, including when we commit them. And we have to live up to that. He said, we are handing the defendants a poisoned chalice. And if we sip from this poisoned chalice, we must be treated the same way. Can't be more explicit. They also defined aggression. Aggression was defined in terms which just apply absolutely and without exception, not only to the invasion of Iraq, but to all sorts of other invasions, in Vietnam and many others. Actually, even the terrorist war against Nicaragua technically falls under the crime of aggression as defined at Nuremberg.
Does the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia?
Well, that's not even questioned. In fact, there was a so-called independent commission of inquiry on the Kosovo bombing led by a very respected South African jurist, Justice Goldstone. And they concluded that the bombing was, in their words, illegal but legitimate. Okay, illegal makes it a war crime. But they said it was legitimate because it was necessary to stop genocide. And then comes the usual inversion of the history. Actually, Justice Goldstone, who is a respectable person, later recognized that the atrocities came after the bombing, and that they were furthermore the anticipated consequence of the bombing. He did